اللهم صل على محمد طب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأجساد وشفائها ونور الأبصار وجلائها وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم.
الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على أفضلهم وخاتم النبيين محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ونزلنا عليك الكتاب تبيانا لكل شيء وهدى ورحمة وبشرى للمسلمين. صدق الله العظيم. Brother Chairman, respected Imam, brothers and sisters here at Masjid Darul Ihsan in Subang Jaya in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before we address or attempt to address the subject of Madinah Nabi fi Akhir al-Zaman, or the city of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam in the last age, allow me to welcome some of my students who have traveled from long distances to be with us here tonight. I cannot mention their names, of course, for security reasons. We have a family who have come from France, a husband and wife and a daughter and a little baby, and we love the baby. And we have another student who's also come from France, but originally from Africa. And we have a student from England, and we have one who was born in India, now resident in the Arab Gulf, we won't mention the name of the country, and who traveled and came day before yesterday, insisting he wants to take the Shahada with us. And he took the Shahada last night and took the name of Yaqub. He's sitting somewhere, so before you leave, do please, there is Yaqub, do please meet your brother in Islam, Yaqub, and embrace him, and make dua that Allah may preserve him in Islam, that his faith might constantly increase. He came into Islam, he said, because of his understanding of this subject, that Islam is explaining the world today. Our subject is entitled Madinah Nabi fi Akhir al-Zaman, or in English, Medina returns to center stage. Medina returns to center stage in Akhir al-Zaman. And this lecture is already written out, and it is very small, so there is no excuse. And Haji Radwan has also translated it into Bahasa, and we have it published on its outside in Bahasa. So you have no excuse for not reading it. The city of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam, the city that he went to when he made hijrah. And we live in a world today in which so many are making hijrah, and so many more want to make hijrah. And they increasingly look into Malaysia as a land to which they should make hijrah. So that is to the credit of the Malay people for the kind of Islam that they have preserved, the Malay people. Of course, there are others also who are Muslims in this land. There are Indian Muslims, there are Chinese Muslims, and this is not to diminish the importance of what they have contributed. But the Malay people, mashallah, they have preserved Islam. And that's why so many want to make hijrah to this country. The city of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, where he sleeps in his grave at this time. And Akhiru Zaman. What is Akhiru Zaman? It is the last age. History will not continue endlessly. There is an end to history in which truth will triumph over all rivals. And that end of history must come first, before the world can end. When will the world end? We don't know. That's not our business. Only Allah knows. But when will history end? Oh yes, we do know, because Allah's Messenger gave us many, many, many signs by which we can recognize that we are living in the last age. Amongst them is this sign that you will find tall buildings. If you have not seen the tall buildings as yet, I suggest you take a taxi to KLCC, Kuala Lumpur City Center, and then look up in the sky and you will see the Twin Towers. Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam told us more than 1400 years ago that this would come. So if you can't see the tall buildings and thus recognize that you're living in the last age, Akhiru Zaman, something is wrong. Something is wrong. In this last age, there is a destiny for the city of Medina. And it is that subject that we address tonight. At the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, Medina occupied center stage in the world. Only once before had Islam been established in the world as a state. And that occurred with Nabi Dawood alayhi salam, and then with his son Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam. And it was known as the holy state of Israel. And in that holy Israel, Allah was recognized as Al-Malik. Sovereignty belonged to Him. Allah was recognized as Al-Akbar. Supreme authority belonged to Him. The politicians don't like this at all. No. And in that city, Allah was recognized as Al-Hakam. His law is the supreme law. And His law is enforced as the supreme law. That was holy Israel, in the Holy Land, Al-Ardul Muqaddasa. And after that, only one more time was Islam established on the earth as a state under the authority of a prophet of Allah, and that was Medina. And so Medina succeeded Jerusalem in center stage on the world stage when the Prophet ﷺ died. We knew it as the Khilafah state, the Khilafah state, a state which recognized Allah as sovereign, recognized Allah's authority as supreme, recognized Allah's law as the supreme law. What Allah made halal, the state enforced as halal. What Allah made haram, the state enforced as haram. So simple. And then came the death of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And strange things began to happen. And the Khilafah was taken out of Medina. You know, the little oasis in the desert, agricultural town, having no significance except for goats and sheep and so on. So let's take it to Damascus, a more civilized city, a more famous city. And so the Khilafah went to Damascus. It went to Baghdad. It went to Cairo. It even went out of the Arab world into a new part of the Arab world, Andalusia, but still Arab. And then it went mysteriously so. And this history is still to be written by a historian who perhaps is not yet born, or maybe is now a baby, but who will one day write this history. The Dajjal, the false Messiah, was at work when the Khilafah was taken. The Khilafah was taken out of the Arab world, taken to a people who did not have credentials to rule over the heartland of Islam. The Ottoman Empire had many things that you don't know about it, and we'll have to speak about it when we give the lecture, inshallah, I think next week, on the conquest of Constantinople in Akhirul Zaman. I think that lecture is next week, inshallah. About 100 years ago, in another 10 years from now, it will be 100 years since the transfer of power took place in Mecca after the Ottoman Turkish rule over Mecca and Medina, which lasted for almost 400 years. An Arab Spring came to the Arab world, and as usual it was a European engineered Arab Spring, a Zionist engineered Arab Spring, which injected the virus of Arab nationalism, and consequence of which Sharif al-Hussein, the Ottoman appointed Sharif of Mecca, rebelled against the Ottoman rule in 1916. And then in 1924, when Mustafa Kemal, I don't call him Ataturk, I call him Mustafa Kemal, when Mustafa Kemal, acting in accordance with the wishes of his Zionist masters, announced the abolition of the Khilafah. An attempt was made to bring the Khilafah back to the Arab world, where it should have been, in the heartland of Islam. The Khilafah started in Medina. So Sharif al-Hussein, 7 days, or was it 4 days, either 4 or 7 days, after the Turkish Grand National Assembly announced the abolition of the Khilafah, Sharif al-Hussein, who is probably the great-grandfather of the present king of Jordan, he declared, I am the Khalifa, I am the Khalifa, I claim the Khilafah in Mecca. Well, this was a positive move. He abolishes the Khilafah, and we say, no, you should not do that. The Khilafah is an essential institution of Islam. And so he attempts to preserve the Khilafah by establishing the Khilafah once again in the Hijaz, in Mecca. But that was not in accordance with British and Zionist planning. You see, they had first of all made an agreement with him at the time when he rebelled against the Ottomans. Lawrence of Arabia had gone into Arabia with a checkbook, sterling pounds, and paid him 7 million sterling pounds to come on our side. So if you are a client of the Anglo-American Zionist Alliance, Judeo-Christian Zionist Alliance, you can't turn against them, tabule. So his claiming to be the Khalifa was not pleasing to the British, who then turned to another ally that they had, someone who didn't have the clout that Sharif Hussein had. So he couldn't ask for 7 million pounds. He was in Riyadh. His name was Abdulaziz ibn Saud. He was known as the Sultan of Najd. And he had to be content with 5,000 sterling pounds a month. And when his people, his armed force, the Ikhwan, not the Ikhwan in Egypt, when they asked him, how could you take the 5,000 pounds a month from the British? Huh? Haram? He said, no, this is jizya. This is jizya. So the British turned to another ally of theirs, who then sent his armed force against Sharif al-Hussein and defeated and conquered Mecca. In fact, they did it without any fight. Mecca surrendered. And that was, in 10 years from now, that will be 100 years since that occurred. And so the regime change took place in Mecca, and 1 year later in Medina. And Mecca and Medina now come under Arab rule. Arab rule. Would the status of Mecca and Medina be restored? Would they come back to center stage? Would the Khilafah be restored? Would Abdulaziz ibn Saud, who has made an alliance with the Wahhabi movement, and I do not use the term Wahhabi in any pejorative way, no, would they restore the Khilafah? You must be making a joke. Abdulaziz ibn Saud knows very well that his masters in London would not allow him to do that. If he were to claim the Khilafah, the same thing would happen to him that happened to Sharif al-Hussein. Because the Zionists do not want the Khilafah state to survive. And now we can understand that Dajjal was at work. Dajjal wants to destroy the Khilafah, and his planning takes hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. That's why there's a historian who is going to come who will write this history one day, but is not yet written, using the tools of analysis out of الزمان, Dajjal. We now understand that the Ottoman success in taking over Constantinople and then in building that powerful Ottoman Empire and then taking over much of the Arab world over its control and then taking the Khilafah to Constantinople out of the Arab world for the first time in the history of Islam, in the history of this Ummah, the Khilafah is taken out of the Arab world. We understand that this was a preliminary step on Dajjal's path to eventually demolish the Khilafah. And that Ottoman rule, which lasted for 400 years, was meant to prepare the way for the destruction of the Khilafah. And so when Ibn Saud, Abdul Aziz Ibn Saud, and I have a book on this subject, it is entitled The Caliphate, the Hijaz, and the Saudi Wahhabi nation state. Maybe Haji Radwan will translate it into Bahasa, inshallah. We are out of stock of that book. It has to be reprinted. I wrote it 35 years ago when I was a PhD student in Geneva, and I had access to the United Nations Library in Geneva. That's where I got all this information from, which otherwise I could not access because it's destroyed. That book tells the story of how these events took place. Abdulaziz ibn Saud now has control over Mecca and Medina. What is he going to do? In that book that I just mentioned, you'll find the history of how the world of Islam responded to the abolition of the Khilafah, the destruction of the Khilafah by Mustafa Kemal. Jamiatul Azhar in Egypt was the first to respond. And they decided that their response would be a Khilafah conference, Mu'tamarul Khilafah, which they organized to take place in Cairo in 1926. I don't think you were born at that time. But Abdulaziz ibn Saud then decided to sabotage the Cairo conference, because the Cairo conference was organized to restore the Khilafah. To restore the Khilafah. And that bothered the British a lot. So he organized a rival conference in Mecca to sabotage that. And that rival conference in Mecca, also in 1926, but on the occasion of the Hajj, that rival conference saw Mecca once again come to center stage in the affairs of the world of Islam. After so many 100 years, Mecca returns to center stage in that conference which was organized in 1926 in Mecca. He organized that conference because he wanted the world of Islam to accept his rule over the Hijaz. But thank Allah that we had men, scholars of Islam from India, who attended that conference. Like Maulana Muhammad Ali Jawhar, rahimahullah. And the Maulana stood up and faced the king to his face and rejected his claim. And when the Indian Islamic scholarship stood up and declared their position, that no, the Hijaz does not belong to you, then the rest of the conference, including the Saudi delegates, could do nothing. And so the effort failed. That was Makkah. The king decided that the conference should take place every year at the time of the Hajj. MashaAllah. What a wonderful suggestion, eh? That the whole of the world of Islam should come together at the time of the Hajj. That the affairs of the world of Islam and the affairs of the world at large may be discussed by the leaders and the scholars. What a wonderful idea by Abdul Aziz ibn Saud. But because the conference said to him, no, we don't recognize you, that was it. The conference was never held again in Makkah. So Makkah now begins to recede back again, no longer occupying any position of significance. What about Medina? Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam is in Medina. What would Abdul Aziz ibn Saud do about this city? When they failed in their effort to get political recognition, they decided a plan for Medina. That Medina will now become a university town. So they established the Islamic University of Medina. And this university in Medina is now charged with the task, because it's not only a Saudi state, it's a Saudi Wahhabi state. And the Wahhabis have a Protestant version of Islam. Study the Protestant movement in Europe and you'll understand much about the Wahhabi Islam. And this Wahhabi Islam, this Protestant Islam, is now going to be established in Medina in this university. Students are going to come from all over the world. And from Medina, a new version of Islam, which is the authentic Islam. Authentic Islam will now reach out to the world of Islam. And the target that you have to attack and demolish is Sufism, the Sufis. These Sufis are the ones who have destroyed Islam. They brought all kind of shirk and bid'ah and this and that and the other. And we have the task of purifying the faith and restoring the original faith. Oh, but the original faith had a spiritual heart. The original faith had men who could see with the nur of Allah. The original faith had men, you couldn't take them for a ride. No, that was the original faith. اتقوا فراسة المؤمن فإنه ينظر بنور الله. So if you are going to restore the original faith in Medina, you are going to produce those scholars who will be able to see that Saudi Arabia's subservience to an alliance with the Anglo-American Zionist alliance is a betrayal of Islam. A horrendous, monstrously wicked betrayal of Islam. If you are going to produce in this university men who have the purest version of Islam, then there will be people who have eyes with which to see. And they will ask the question, well, how come? You have control of the Hijaz, you have control of Makkah and Medina. Why are you not restoring the Khilafah? At least this much will come out of the university. But Protestant Islam has eyes and yet cannot see. Protestant Islam has ears and yet cannot hear. Protestant Islam has hearts and yet do not understand. Ulaika kal-an'am. They're just like cattle. Don't be annoyed with me for speaking the truth. If you had any integrity, then for the last 70, 80 years, you would have been raising your voice in Mecca and Medina and calling for the restoration of the Khilafah. If you had any integrity, you would have denounced the Saudi regime for their subservience to and the alliance with the monstrously wicked Anglo-American Zionist alliance, Judeo-Christian alliance. Allah in the Quran has prohibited Muslim alliance with a Judeo-Christian alliance. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء بعضهم أولياء بعض. Do not take such Jews and do not take such Christians, not all Jews, not all Christians. Do not take such Jews and do not take such Christians as your friends and allies, who themselves are friends and allies of each other. The Quran is referring to this Judeo-Christian Anglo-American Zionist alliance. And if you become their allies, as Saudi Arabia has done, as Kuwait has done, as Qatar has done, so many others, وَمَن يَتَوَلَّهُم مِّنكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. Whosoever from amongst you turn to them for friendship and alliance, you've lost your Islam. You now belong to them. And Allah does not provide guidance for a people whose trademark is wickedness. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. And so the university town was dust in your eyes. The claim that this is the pure Islam was dust in your eyes, because it was Protestant Islam all the way in Medina. We now turn to our subject about the destiny of Medina in Akhirul Zaman. And when we take up this subject, the Saudi state is not going to like it at all. Oh no. But this is the word of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And we now have the internet, we now have YouTube, which can take these words. You can't stop it. All the people of Saudi Arabia can listen now and hear what we have to say. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam spoke and said, the hadith is narrated by Mu'adh ibn Jabal, and it is in the Sunan of Abi Dawood. He said that Umranu Bayt al-Maqdis, at that time when Jerusalem is flourishing, when Jerusalem is in center stage of the world, at that time, Kharabu Yathrib, Medina at that time, will be in a state of desolation, having no significance at all, playing absolutely no role whatsoever, not in world affairs, not in affairs of the world of Islam. Umranu Bayt al-Maqdis, Kharabu Yathrib. And then he said, Kharabu Yathrib, Khurujul Malhama. At that time, when Yathrib, meaning Medina, Yathrib is the old name, Medina, when Yathrib is in a state of desolation, at that time the world will experience the Malhama, the great war that will make First World War and Second World War look like peanuts. That's Malhama. And then he said, now listen carefully, that Khurujul Malhama, Fathul Constantiniya, that at that time when the great war takes place, at that time it will lead to the conquest of Constantinople. Today Mustafa Kamal didn't like the name Constantinople because it's there in the hadith. So he changed the name from Constantinople to Istanbul. That's the reason why he changed it, because he doesn't want you to read this hadith. That's why. And then he said, Fathul Constantiniya Khurujud Dajjal. At that time, when Constantinople is conquered, that is a time when you experience the Khuruj of Dajjal. Now, I have another lecture coming up at De Palma Hotel. You know where De Palma is? Ampang Point. On this subject. The conquest of Constantinople. Oh, is it in UAE? UAE, sorry. Yes. This subject is at the university, the International Islamic University. The conquest of Constantinople in Akhirul Zaman, I think it's July 4th? Yeah, July 4th, inshallah, at the International Islamic University. So, the conquest of Constantinople will lead to the Khuruj of Dajjal. It'll take some time for me to explain the term Khuruj al-Dajjal. Where are we now in that timeline? Is Jerusalem now at center stage in the world? The answer is, Jerusalem is very close to that. All that Jerusalem now needs is the collapse of the US dollar, which is about to take place, the collapse of the US economy, which is about to take place, and because of our study of Islamic eschatology, Ilmu Akhiru Zaman, we were able to tell you 15 years ago that this is going to happen. Protestant Islam could not do that. No, no. At this time, all that Jerusalem needs is not only for the US dollar to collapse, for the US economy to collapse, not only for paper money to disappear, and all the world is now imprisoned in electronic money, digital money, but also that the United States must be trapped into a military adventure that will lead to the possibility of defeat for the United States. And Israel has to intervene to save the United States from defeat. And that the United Nations organization probably has to fold up and be shifted to Jerusalem. That the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank probably have to shift to Jerusalem. I don't know whether these things will actually occur or not, whether it will be necessary or not, but when you see these things happening, you know that the United States is being taken off center stage as the ruling state in the world, so that Israel can replace the United States. And so Jerusalem becomes the ruling city in the world. This is Umran Bayt al-Maqdis, the flourishing state of Jerusalem. This is what the hadith is speaking of. And so our analysis is that we are now located at that moment in time when Jerusalem is already in a flourishing state, or Jerusalem is about to take over into that state which is the flourishing state that the Prophet ﷺ is speaking of. But Protestant Islam may have other views, and they may have read in some kitab or some kitab or some kitab that Jerusalem had that flourishing state so long ago. Well, then those who are convinced by Protestant Islam can accept that view. And those who are persuaded that this is the moment can accept this view. Alhamdulillah, no boxing gloves necessary. And we are brothers. And so, if we are now living at that time when Jerusalem is in the state of the flourishing state, as said of in the hadith, We are also living at that time when Medina is now in a state of desolation. Everybody can see that Medina is playing absolutely no role whatsoever in the affairs of the world and in the affairs of the world of Islam. Not even in the affairs of Saudi Arabia. It is in a state of desolation, mournful desolation. Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam is left. He's gone, he's put aside. He's weeping in his grave. And so now we can expect the malhama, the great wars. And as I said to you, these great wars which are coming, I don't think it's one war, I think it's several wars. These great wars which are coming are going to make the First World War and the Second World War look like a fight over peanuts. Because this great malhama which is coming is going to substantially reduce the population of the world. Most of mankind now alive will not be living when the malhama has ended. But the malhama is going to affect the Arabs more than all others. The malhama involves also, I believe, nuclear warfare in the world between the two major alliances, the Anglo-American Judeo-Christian Zionist alliance and the Russian-led alliance, which are both nuclear armed. And this nuclear warfare, which involves probably thousands of nuclear weapons exploding, could possibly lead to such a cloud cover, mushroom, that no sunlight can penetrate. No sunlight can penetrate. We don't have it either in the Quran or in the Hadith, the 3 days of darkness. But ask any Christian, Kumar, who is now Yaqub, he took the Shahada last night, he probably knows about the 3 days of darkness in the Christian scriptures. What we have is dukhan, or smoke. And that could be, and I can be wrong. And let me repeat it one more time before we have the azan. That yes, I do give my opinions. Yes, I do. But whenever I give opinion, I do not want you to accept my opinion. No. You must only accept my opinion when you are convinced that it is correct. Because if I have students who accept everything that I say, then when I make a mistake, no one will correct me. The malhama is the great war. I believe it will be a series of wars. I believe that it is going to climax with nuclear warfare between the two nuclear powers in the world, the American-led alliance, the Zionist alliance, and the Russian alliance. Why will this great war take place? Answer: because the Zionists want to rule the world. Simple. Why do the Zionists want to rule the world? Because the Zionists want that a state of Israel be restored in the Holy Land, and they want to give to that state of Israel the status of ruling state in the world. Simple. Well, why do they want the state of Israel to rule the world? Oh, any follower of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam could answer that question. It's so simple. Although now we live in that age when you never hear this from the mimbar anymore. Nobody talks about Dajjal from the mimbar. Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, I was studying this hadith just last week. He says the time will come when no one will talk about Dajjal from the mimbar. That's what he said. But you and I know the reason why Israel wants to become the ruling state in the world is so that a man who would be a Jew, who would be a young man, who would be powerfully built, who would have curly hair, and you know I always had this belief that curly hair meant top of the head, curly, until a student from Egypt met with me. He was passing through and insisted I had to go to the airport to meet him, and we were talking so much he missed his flight. So he explained to me, no, Sheikh Imran, it's not curly hair, it's over here. The Orthodox Jews, because of the Torah, they have to have curls at the side of the face. That is what the Prophet ﷺ is talking about. This man wants to rule over Israel and then rule over the world, and so he can make a claim that I am Al-Masih. But we have the Quran. The Quran told us Al-Masih is the son of Maryam alayhi salam. And you are not the son of Maryam, but he is the false Messiah, Dajjal. He wants to declare that I am the true Messiah, so he has to rule the world. And all those who see with only one eye, like Dajjal, the other eye is blind, meaning internally blind, they will accept him as the Messiah. Protestant Islam will also say, this cannot be Dajjal. No, double it. Why? Oh, the Prophet said, Dajjal has only one eye, this man has two. So he can't be Dajjal. That's Protestant Islam. This is the reason why we are heading towards Malhama, the Great War. 10 years ago, I wrote Jerusalem in the Quran. Most of you have read it already. We now have it in Bahasa, but of course Bahasa is twice the size of English. If you have not read it as yet, please read it, so you'll understand why the Malhama is coming. This great conflagration, because Russia will not bend its knee to Israel, and China will not bend her knee to Israel. That's why you're going to get the Malhama. But I believe the Malhama is going to be several wars, not just one war. And at the end of this Malhama, we're going to witness the conquest of Constantinople. Now this is strange, because it was universally accepted by the world of Islam, including Protestant Islam. Oh, that Constantinople was already conquered 600 years ago. Sheikh Imran, have you been sleeping for so long? Have you not heard about the Sultan Muhammad Fatih, the Ottoman Sultan who conquered Constantinople in 1456, I believe? You've been sleeping for a long time. No. When you read this booklet, you will find the evidence that could not qualify as the conquest of Constantinople, about which Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam said, the hadith is in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. You're going to get the Arabic text of each one of these ahadith in this book. Inshallah, Medina returns to center stage in Akhirul Zaman. He said, لَتَفْتَحَنَّ الْقُنْسْتَنْتِنِيَّةِ, you will most certainly conquer Constantinople. You, meaning The Muslims. The Muslims. لَتَفْتَحَنَّ الْقُسْطَنْطِينِيَّةَ, you will most certainly conquer Constantinople. وَلَنِعْمَ الْأَمِيرُ آمِرُهَا وَلَنِعْمَ الْجَيْشُ ذَلِكَ الْجَيْشُ. And he praised that army as a wonderful army. And he praised the commander-in-chief, the wonderful Amir of that army. These are the words of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. We do not have the time tonight to take up the subject. Why do we reject the view that that conquest, that Ottoman conquest of Constantinople in 1456 was not the fulfillment of this hadith? Could not be. There are a number of reasons, but we'll take it up in that lecture at the International Islamic University, inshallah. But for tonight, this much. The conquest of Constantinople takes place just before the khuruj of Dajjal. Meaning, Dajjal will now appear in the form of a human being. Khuruj. Dajjal was released from his chains in the lifetime of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Dajjal is the mastermind. He is the architect of the political system that we now have, and the modern secular state, which says, have you heard? The modern secular state says, Allah is no longer Al-Malik. No. Allah is no longer the sovereign. The state is now sovereign. And if you can't understand that, you got peanuts in your head. Allah is no longer Al-Akbar. Allah does not have supreme authority anymore. No. Supreme authority in all matters pertaining to international peace and security now resides with the Zionists sitting in the Security Council of the United Nations. We have a question and answer session coming up. Anybody can challenge me, eh? I love that. I've studied my subject. Allah is no longer Al-Hakam. No, he is no longer the supreme lawgiver. The state is now the supreme lawgiver. The parliament is now the supreme lawgiver. Do you think this came from? It dropped out of the sky? No. This is Dajjal. He created it. Do you think Protestant Islam recognized that? No. Allah has made halal and Allah has made haram. But the modern secular state can make halal what Allah made haram, and can make haram what Allah has made halal. And if you cannot see that, you have peanuts in your head. And yet they go and they faithfully vote to legitimize what Dajjal created to replace the Khilafah. Not me. You're not going to find me going and voting to legitimate that state. Not me. And not my students. But if the cattle want to go, let them go. Let them go. So Dajjal was released at that time. Where do you think paper money came from? Huh? And the electronic digital money that's coming, which replaced the dinar and dirham. This paper money which has functioned as an instrument of financial enslavement, which has taken Indonesia to where Indonesia is now, taken Bangladesh to where Bangladesh is now, taken Pakistan and Egypt to where they are now. Who do you think has brought this monetary system into being? This is Dajjal's work. But Protestant Islam will never say that. No. They got eyes and they don't see. They got ears and they don't hear. They got hearts and they don't understand. And my frustration has led me now to the end of the rope. End of the rope. I don't know what more to do with these brothers of mine. And so Dajjal is the mastermind. He was released in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. But he will only appear in human form at the very end of his life. Read this book and it will tell you the story. There are 3 circles, 3 blue circles there. This cover design is by a Malay artist. It shows Dajjal's first stage and second stage and third stage until Dajjal appears in human form. And that is the khuruj of Dajjal. Now let's go back to the Malhama, which is the heart of our subject. I expect that Israel is going to make her move sometime soon, probably within the next few months. Israel can either attack Pakistan to destroy the nuclear plants and denuclearize Pakistan, and then India takes over to break up Pakistan, or attack Iran, not only to destroy the nuclear plants, but more importantly, to bring about regime change, so that a new government comes to Iran which will be virulently Shia and who can make a deal with Israel. Not this government in Iran, no sir. You have to get another one. Or attack Syria, which might be the first round, to bring about regime change in Syria. Or attack Egypt, because Egypt is a target. But once Israel starts, Israel strikes out, and the first war starts, it is going to lead to one war after another, until eventually it culminates with the Malhama. Israel is going to wage these wars because Israel wants to take over from the United States as the ruling state in the world. Now, in order for Israel to rule the world, Israel must first demonstrate its capacity to rule over the Arabs. Make sense? Because Israel is surrounded by the Arabs. Israel has to establish, and they are listening to me in Israel, Israel has to establish its political and economic dominion over the Arabs. And the Prophet ﷺ spoke 1400 years ago when he said, "Wailul lil Arab, woe unto the Arabs, min sharrin qad iktaraba, because of a great evil which is now going to come upon you." And he raised his hands and put his fingers like this and made a circle. And he said, "Today," but Protestants in Islam doesn't understand the word today. He said, "Today a hole has been made in that barrier bit by Zulkarnain, the Radam." And so the release of Gog and Magog began in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. Who studies Gog and Magog today? Who lectures about Gog and Magog today? Have you ever heard a khutbah from the mimbar on Gog and Magog? Never. And yet Ya'juj and Ma'juj are in the Quran. Alhamdulillah, I have a book outside, an Islamic view of Gog and Magog in the modern world, and Haji Radwan has promised to translate it into Bahasa. Alhamdulillah. When Israel launches these big wars, her first target would be the Arabs. After eliminating Pakistan nuclear weapons, the Arabs. How to establish Israeli political and economic dominion over the Arabs when the Arabs are so many? One of the weapons that Israel will have to use, that the Zionists will have to use, would be biological warfare. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ spoke about that biological warfare which is coming. This hadith is narrated by Auf ibn Malik, and it is in Sahih Bukhari. I went to the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam during the Ghazwa of Tabuk, while he was sitting in a tent made of leather. And he said to me, count 6 signs that indicate the approach of the Sa'ah. Number 1, my death. Number 2, the conquest of Jerusalem. And number 3, he said, a plague. Today it's no longer called plague, it's called epidemics, like swine flu and AIDS. A plague which will affect you, meaning the Arabs, in great numbers and kill you in great numbers, the way a plague kills sheep in great numbers. And then an increase of wealth to such an extent that even if one is given 100 dinars, he will not be satisfied. And then an affliction which no Arab house will escape. And then a truce between you and Banu al-Asfar, who will betray you and attack you under 80 flags. Under each flag will be 12,000 soldiers. That part of the hadith is too difficult for me at this time. That truce, and then they will attack you with under 80 flags. But we do have a lecture coming up entitled Alliance with Rome in Akhirul Zaman, inshallah. A second hadith, which is in Ibn Majah and Tirmizi, narrated by Abdullah ibn Amr, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, there will come a calamity which will wipe out the Arabs. Their slain will be in hell. And at that time the tongue, Jazeera, CNN, the tongue will be more severe than the blow of a sword. The Arabs know about this. And so as soon as Israel launches her wars, the world of the Arabs, particularly Arabian Peninsula, are going to be in a state of expectancy now for that biological attack which they know is coming. But now listen, Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu said in a hadith recorded in the Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari, he said, neither plague nor Dajjal can enter Medina. Neither plague nor Dajjal can enter Medina. In another hadith, even Makkah is also mentioned, indicating that there is a link between plague or biological warfare and Dajjal, indicating that the Zionists are going to use this as a weapon. So once Israel starts her wars, which are going to be soon, the Arabs know that the only place you can be safe, praise be to Allah, the only place where you can be safe is in Makkah and Medina. You will not die from plague. But if you're outside of Makkah and Medina, you can be wiped out. So as soon as Israel starts her wars, we can anticipate a stampede of Arabs moving to Mecca and Medina for safety. When that happens, then you're going to have both those who have faith in Allah in their hearts, fleeing to Medina, and those who are also friends of the Zionists because they also want to live, fleeing to Medina. Those who are kuffar, munafiqun, they also fleeing to Medina because they want to survive. It is at that time that the world will see. It's going to make news. It's going to be center stage in the world when the biological war starts on the Arabs, and the Arabs are dying like sheep. It's going to make news. And the Arabs are moving, stampeding towards Mecca and Medina. That's going to make news. And so Mecca and Medina return to center stage in the world because of the plague or biological warfare. And the reason why they now occupy center stage is because the angels are guarding Mecca and Medina. Because the angels are guarding Mecca and Medina, that is why neither plague nor Dajjal can enter Mecca and Medina. So we have now reached a stage where Mecca and Medina are now in center stage in the world, making the news. But that's not the end of the story. The rest of the story is going to make the Saudis very angry. Hadith of Sahih Bukhari. Anas bin Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu said, the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam said, there is no town that Dajjal will not enter except Mecca and Medina. There is no entrance to its entrances which is not guarded by the angels in rows at that time. But then he went on to say that Medina, not Mecca, Medina will shake 3 times. Is this going to be 3 earthquakes? Geological earthquakes? Or is this going to be 3 political earthquakes? Because of this chemical combustion, you have all of these people who are faithful to Islam and they despise the Saudi regime. And they're Saudis. And you have all of these others who are faithful camp followers of the Zionists. And these 2 people are together in the same town of Medina. The sparks are going to fly. And so the 3 shaking could be 3, what they call it, Arab Spring? 3 upheavals, uprisings. Could be. Allah knows best. But when these 3 shakings takes place, guess what's going to happen? Allah is going to send every single kafir and munafiq out of Medina. And they will go and join Dajjal. Because he would have camped, he would have descended and camped outside of Medina in a marshy, salty land. Meaning Israel is going to attack. And the Israeli forces are going to be camped outside Medina. Because Israel wants Medina. Why? Because the Jews lived in Medina. Why? Because the Jews were expelled from Medina. Why? Study the story of Banu Qurayza. Why? Study the story of Banu Qaynuqa. And you know why Israel wants revenge. Revenge. So they're outside of Medina. They camp, said the Prophet ﷺ. Dajjal is camped outside of Medina. And when Medina shakes 3 times, you know the story that the rats leave a sinking ship. The rats leave a sinking ship. These followers of Dajjal in Medina, Saudis, Arabs, would now feel that Medina is doomed. Doomed. So let's get out. And they go and join the Zionists. But the angels will prevent Dajjal from entering Medina, protect Medina. And the attack will be diverted to Damascus. When that happens, if you have not accepted Islam as yet, what are you waiting for? This is what Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam said more than 1400 years ago, that this is going to happen. Nobody else has said that. No Christian eschatology has given that. No Jewish eschatology has given that. Only Islamic eschatology. Only Islamic eschatology. So as the attack is diverted to Damascus, the world will see Medina once again in center stage. Because all the kuffar and munafiqun have been expelled. I don't know whether there will be any professors left in the Islamic University of Medina at that time. And these words are not being spoken in any insulting and derogatory way. While still there is time, my brothers, you must stand up. Stand up for the truth. And this is the truth, regardless of the price that you have to pay. And so Medina returns to center stage in Akhirul Zaman. All the world's attention is now on Medina, because it is now plain as daylight. Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, in his grave in Medina, has spoken the truth. And the angels are guarding Medina. And therefore the truth is here in Islam. When the attack is diverted to Damascus, it is at that time that Nabi Isa alayhi salam will come down. It is at that time that Imam al-Mahdi would be in the masjid. It is at that time that when Nabi Isa alayhi salam comes down with his hands resting on the wings of 2 angels, that Imam al-Mahdi will say, here he is, this is the Messiah, the son of Mary. It is at that time that Nabi Isa alayhi salam would kill Dajjal. It is at that time that Gog and Magog would then be destroyed. It is at that time that the Muslim army will be unstoppable from Khurasan. Unstoppable. And they are already fighting. NATO is the most powerful military force in the world. And yet in Khurasan, in Afghanistan, without modern weapons, they have defied NATO for 10 years. And now NATO is embarrassed by these our brothers in Afghanistan fighting. And so now let us end with joy in our hearts for those whose hearts are faithful to Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, who despise the political system brought by Dajjal, who despise the banking system brought by Dajjal, who despise the monetary system brought by Dajjal, who despise the feminist revolution brought by Dajjal, who despise the Anglo-American Judeo-Christian Zionist alliance which is waging war on Islam, who will never be friends and allies of the Zionists. For such people, there is now joy in your hearts. because Madinatun Nabi is destined to return to center stage in Akhirul Zaman. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may protect and preserve faith in our hearts from Dajjal, that he may not destroy our faith, and that we may be able to stand up and struggle in the cause of truth, that our struggle might be successful. Insha'Allah. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka anta as-sami'ul alim wa tub alayna ya Mawlana innaka anta at-tawwab rahim bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Ameen. Okay.
This is just
Okay. I have never ever attempted to give a figure about Dajjal's first day, like a year. Others have done it. I have never done it. All I can say is that the first stage, or a day like a year, is a long period of time. That's all I've said. I've never said 1,000 years, I've never said 100 years, I've never attempted to give a timeline in fixed numbers, yeah. But those who feel that this should be done should produce their analysis and publish it, so that they can be available for public scrutiny. So I would suggest to you that you should do the same thing. Publish your analysis for public scrutiny, so that people can examine it and conclude whatever they want. But I am not going to put any timeline of a fixed number of years. The question pertains to the conflict between the United States of America and Pakistan. The United States, I believe, has declared that they are at war with Pakistan. A state of war exists. And yet the Pakistani Prime Minister will fly to the United States. And the Pakistani President will fly to the United States. He just flew to Detroit, I believe. Invitation from NATO, and they're at war with each other. The United States have declared we're at war to each other. I don't think I need to say anything more about the quality of leadership at this time in Pakistan. What is going to happen? Is Israel going to attack Pakistan? Outside you will find my little booklet, A Muslim Response to the Attack on America, 9/11. I told you I was in New York on the morning of 9/11. I told you I went to Kennedy Airport at 7 o'clock that morning in order to receive someone arriving from Pakistan. And then from Kennedy Airport I went to LaGuardia Airport that morning. And when I reached the LaGuardia Airport, all flights were closed, suspended. And then after sitting in a while, the airport is now closed and we are asked to leave. And then we went back home, and then on television everything came out on television. Because I was studying this subject of Jerusalem and the Quran, I already had this book in my head at that time. I immediately came to the conclusion that there's a connection between this attack and the one that occurred in the summer of 1914. The assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in Sarajevo. And so I knew that this was a false flag attack. Eventually they're going to blame us for it. And as the days passed, the newspapers and television began to throw in a little bit about Muslims. Eventually we got the news that Osama bin Laden and his men hiding in caves in Afghanistan kept the US Air Force on the ground. If that is accepted as truth, then a cow can also jump over the moon. But most people can now recognize that this was false. This was the CIA and the Mossad And then I wrote a Muslim response to the attack on America and published it by December, right here in Malaysia, by December 2001. And in that booklet, which is outside, I said my view is that they have done 9/11 in order to be able to use 9/11 to attack Pakistan. And it is to the credit of the Pakistani people that 10 years have passed and they've not as yet been able to launch the attack on Pakistan. But I think the Pakistani people know that the attack is coming. They know it. Unless and until Pakistan makes tawbah. And how do you make tawbah? You make tawbah by returning to Allah and returning to Islam. You cannot expect that your dua will be accepted when you are a secular state, a member state of the United Nations, a member state of the International Monetary Fund, a member state of the World Bank, using this crooked paper money called the rupee and using the Bangladeshi taka, because people are now attacking me saying I'm unfair to Pakistan. Don't mention the taka as well. And the rupiah of Indonesia, no, I am not biased against Pakistan, not at all. I love the Pakistani people. I can't get naan in this country. The only place I can get good naan is in Pakistan. And I got my education in Pakistan. The Pakistani people paid for me to get the knowledge of Islam. So I can't forget that. So they want to use Afghanistan as a base to attack Pakistan. Pakistani people know that. When will the attack on Pakistan be launched? Oh, it started already. The Americans have been killing Pakistan every day, killing Pakistanis every day. The Pakistan armed forces, the people in the Pakistan armed forces have got it up to their throat. They're so angry. So angry. The last one was an attack on Pakistani soldiers, sleeping in the night. And they killed some 20-something of them. Who did it? The Zionists. The Zionists. So the attack has already been launched. But when will the major attack take place, which is designed to destroy the Pakistani nuclear plants and destroy the Pakistani nuclear weapons and break up Pakistan with the help of India? When will that take place? I don't know. I know it's coming soon. And I know that if you do not make tawbah and turn away from the secular state and restore, or at least declare that we want this Republican state in the garbage bin. And the modern parliament can never be a substitute for the Khilafah. Put it in the garbage bin. Make tawbah. Return to Darul Islam. Return to an Amir. Make tawbah. Get rid of that banking system. Get the bankers on the run. Chase them out. Make tawbah. Greece just dropped out of the Euro system. Greece. And there is the possibility that Greece may accept the advice given to Greece by Hugo Salinas Price of Mexico, who advised Greece to introduce the dirham, the silver coin. If you do not do that, the Greek money, I think it's called the drachma. What's it? Anybody knows the name? Drachma? The drachma is going to continue to fall in value. The bankers are going to ensure of that. So make tawbah in Pakistan and make the announcement. Ask any politician in Pakistan, please make this announcement that we are going to bring back dinar and dirham in this country. No one is going to stop us. And when you give your word, keep your word. And maybe if you do these things, your dua might reach Allah. Is there a hadith about Banu Tamim assisting Imam al-Mahdi? The hadith says that Banu Tamim will never give up jihad. I have a question here about supporting the Russians. And that Imran Hussein is advising that we must support the Russians, that we must become allies of the Russians. I think you're misunderstanding me. Here is a hadith, there's a prophecy, and I have a duty to try to understand the prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ. He said that you're going to make an alliance with Rome. That's what he said. And it is my understanding that the proper methodology in identifying who is Rome, the proper methodology is to start with the Quran. That is proper methodology. There are others who differ with me and they start with the hadith, but I start with the Quran. And as a consequence, I have come to the conclusion that Rome today is Russia and the Russian alliance. But you don't have to accept my view. You don't have to accept my view. But we do have a lecture coming up on alliance with Rome, Muslim alliance with Rome in Akhirul Zaman. So I suggest that we wait for that lecture. Can we? Inshallah. The Prophet ﷺ said about Akhirul Zaman, and this question is posed concerning this hadith, that you will most certainly fight the Jews. So there's not going to be any Camp David Accord to bring peace, or any Madrid or Oslo peace talks. No, not going to work. That you will most certainly fight the Jews, and you'll most certainly defeat them. And at that time, even the stones will speak. O Muslim, there's a Jew hiding behind me, so come and kill him. And the question is asked, how can the stones speak? And the answer is, when the stones speak, you're not going to hear it with these ears. No. When the stones speak, you will hear it with your heart. Yes. There are two ways to approach the subject. Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, in the 5 years prior to the event in the cave of Hira, he used to seek solitude. Today we call it i'tikaf. So he'd go to lonely places. And he said that the trees would offer greetings to me, and the stones will offer greetings to me on those occasions when he goes into the solitude. But if you were there with him, would you hear it? Huh? No. If you were there with the Prophet ﷺ, you would not hear the trees offering salams to him. You would not hear the stones offering salams to him, because he's not hearing it with these ears. Do we have any other ears beside these ears? Do we have any other eyes beside these eyes? Modern Western civilization says no. The Quran says yes. The Quran says that the heart can see and the heart can hear. And the greatest predicament of the Zionists today, the greatest predicament of the state of Israel today, is they have lost moral authority. They have descended into an abyss of oppression so great that tomorrow even the stones will speak. And they're listening to me. So this is no problem. If Allah gives you the capacity to hear, you'll hear the stones speak. Oh my gosh, this is a hadith to make you weep. And I studied this hadith just about 2 weeks ago. The Prophet said, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, there's something I fear for my ummah more than Dajjal. What is it? About Dajjal, he said that the greatest fitna that mankind will experience from the time of Adam alayhi salam to the last day would be the fitna of Dajjal. And yet in this hadith he says, there's something I fear for my ummah greater than Dajjal. And Abu Dharr radiallahu ta'ala anhu became afraid. The hadith is in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. According to this text over here, I have my text at home. Abu Dharr radiallahu ta'ala anhu became afraid and he asked, O Messenger of Allah, what is that you fear more than Dajjal for your ummah? And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam replied and he said, Al-a'imma al-mudillun, the misguided imams, the misguided religious scholars. This is what I fear for my ummah more than I fear for Dajjal. Could you kindly explain how can we respect those scholars who are misguided? And how can we protect ourselves from being misguided by them? Number one, in order for a scholar of Islam to escape from the trap set by Dajjal, he's got to walk in the footsteps of Khidr alayhi salam. So do please go back to my lecture that I delivered maybe 1 week ago on Khidr alayhi salam and Akhirul Zaman. You could have a heart that is sincere and yet become misguided. A man would wake up in the morning with faith in his heart in Akhirul Zaman and would lose his faith by the time the night comes. A man will go to sleep at night with faith in his heart and lose his faith by the time the morning comes, said Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. When you go to Khidr alayhi salam, you get number one, methodology. Protestant Islam cannot handle Akhirul Zaman. No. Let me share with you something I learned only today. Only today. That's how knowledge comes, eh? Little by little. Last night we had the weekly zikr at my apartment and we recite Surah Al-Kahf in the apartment. Because the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, recite Surah Al-Kahf on the day of Jum'ah, and you get nur from the samawat to the up, and that nur will remain with you until the next Jum'ah. And recite the first 10 and the last 10 ayat of Surah Al-Kahf for protection from the fitna of Dajjal. So you might want to do that, to recite Surah Al-Kahf on the day of Jum'ah. After we complete the recitation, then I normally give a little talk. And last night I gave the talk on those few ayat about the young man in the cave. And Allah says in the Quran, سَيَقُولُونَ بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ سَيَقُولُونَ, they will say. Who are they? سَيَقُولُونَ ثَلَاثَةٌ رَابِعُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ. They will say that there were three, and the dog was the fourth. 3 young men in the cave. وَيَقُولُونَ خَمْسَةٌ وَسَادِسُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ رَجْمًا بِالْغَيْبِ. And they will continue their guesswork. They will continue their guesswork. They will say, no, there were 5. The dog was the 6th. وَيَقُولُونَ سَبْعَةٌ وَثَامِنُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ. And they'll continue their argumentation. But there were 7, and the dog was the 8th. In the process, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is directing attention to a methodology that He critically examines, and He discards this methodology. That these are a people who are directing primary attention to the husk, the rice husk, and not paying attention to the rice grain. When you cook the rice, it's called nasi. But when it's uncooked, it is called baras. Is that correct? Baras. So the baras, or the rice has a, outside it has a husk. What is the husk called? Huh? Oh, you don't have husk in Malaysia? Huh? Only one person knows the name, ampas or something, not ampang, eh? And then you have the rice grain, the rice grain. And so proper methodology is not to direct all your attention to the rice husk, but rather to direct your primary attention to the rice grain and not let the rice husk divert your attention. That's proper methodology. So Dajjal puts all the rice husk in your face and puts it in your eyes like dust, and you remain stuck there while missing the essence of the story. This methodology is today at work in the world. This is Protestant Islam. These are the ones who've been criticizing me every day, and now they're doing more than that, they're even ridiculing me. May Allah forgive these brothers. That's not the way. If I am making a critical assessment of your methodology and I'm doing it with respect, I'm not doing it in any disparaging way, I'm not insulting you, I'm not disrespecting you. This is the battleground of knowledge. And in this battleground of knowledge, as we contest different viewpoints, we all benefit. I benefit and you benefit. So I am assessing your methodology, and I'm saying your methodology is wrong. Your methodology cannot deliver you with the knowledge of Akhirul Zaman to understand the world today. How can we recognize those scholars who have been misguided? There you are. The spiritual quest is at the heart of Nur. Nur. If you pursue the spiritual quest, then Allah can choose to give you Nur. But you got to do your homework, because you'll find the most learned of all men at the place where the 2 oceans meet. And what are the 2 oceans? Majma'ul Bahrain. The 2 oceans are the ocean of knowledge that is externally acquired. So you've got to study politics. And you've got to study international politics. You've got to study history. You've got to study economics. You've got to study international economics. You've got to study international monetary economics. You've got to study comparative religion. You've got to study science, philosophy of science, philosophy of history. All of these disciplines, that is the ocean of knowledge externally acquired. If you don't plant, you cannot reap. And then there is the ocean of knowledge internally received. يَهْدِ اللَّهُ لِنُورِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Allah gives His nur to whomsoever Allah gives. And then comes that difficult task of bringing these two oceans of knowledge together, integrated into a harmonious whole. You need a master. You need an absolute master to do that. And that was the teacher that I had. May Allah bless him. Maulana Dr. Muhammad Fadlur Rahman Ansari Rahimahullah, who died in Karachi, Pakistan, is buried in Karachi, Pakistan. He was my teacher. It is because I got that from him that I could do this humble work that I'm now doing. But I pray that Allah may guide my students around the world. Imran Hussein is not important. This name is not important. This mission is important. This knowledge is important. This struggle is important. One man dies, another man takes his place. And I pray that Allah may bless them, that they may grow to be scholars of Islam tomorrow, of whom the world of Islam may be proud, and not the misguided imams about whom the Prophet ﷺ spoke and said, I fear these misguided imams more than I fear Dajjal for my ummah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. We have a lecture tomorrow night. Let me just give it to you. Oh my gosh, it is such a difficult
Allah faham beli taubatan waghfir dhunubi fa innaka ghafiru dhanbil azim. Tuhanku, aku tidak layak untuk syurgamu, tetapi aku tidak pula sanggup menanggung siksa nerakamu. Dari itu kurniakanlah ampunan kepadaku, ampunkanlah dosaku. Sesungguhnya Engkaulah pengampun dosa-dosa besar. Tuhanku, aku tidak layak untuk syurgamu, tetapi aku tidak pula sanggup menanggung siksa nerakamu. Dari itu kurniakanlah ampunan kepadaku, ampunkanlah dosaku. Sesungguhnya Engkaulah pengampun dosa-dosa besar. Ilahi lasturil firdausi a'la wala aqwa ala naril jahim. Allah fahab li taubatan waghfir dhunubi fa innaka ghafiru dhanbil azim. Ilahi lastu lil firdausi a'la wala aqwa ala naril jahim. Allah faham berita